Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is that the Palestinians have a master plan. They plan to hurt Israel in every possible way, militarily, politically, economically, and now financially. Part of the Palestinian master plan against Israel involves both the IRS and the U.S. Department of the Treasury. 2 American Arabs and 1 American Jew have brought suit against the U.S. Treasury for not supervising non-profit groups that are giving money to Israel. The suit accuses the United States of aiding terrorism because Israeli organizations have friends of offices in the U.S. These offices, they claim, raise money that is donated to Israeli causes, and everything Israeli is, according to their view, a component of terror. And these agencies are tax exempt. Their plan will not succeed, but it will certainly be annoying. The Friends of groups mentioned in the suit are neither terrorist supporters nor are they racist. They do have a vastly different agenda than the 3 people bringing the suit, who find themselves squarely in the anti-Israel camp. The pro-Israel Friends of groups receiving the monies are not specifically named in the suit at all. They are brought forth as examples of violation of U.S. law and Treasury rules for tax-free donations. The complaint is 72 pages long and was formally submitted on December 16th. It claims that over $1 billion a year of U.S. money goes to illegal causes and is tax deducted. The complaint does list many of the groups that are accused of giving money and says that there are a total of 150 groups total in terms of being guilty in this way. They claim that the money should be taxable and that the gifts are illegal because they support terror. The groups include Friends of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, Friends of Ariel University, Hebron Fund, the Gush Etzion Foundation, and many others. The case asserts that some of these groups have no presence at all in the United States other than simply a POB, a post office box. The case asserts that because of the status of these groups, up to $1 trillion of tax money has been lost over the past few decades, although no real math is actually given in the suit. The suit claims that all this money is channeled into groups in Israel that perpetrate or support terror and violence, and in cases where Israel has evicted people from their homes, clearly violate human rights. Like the Palestinian master plan, this suit has no merit. It is wrong, and it will be thrown out. Nevertheless, it is disturbing. The central problem with the case is that it is not actually based on law or U.S. Department of Treasury procedure. The suit's arguments are all predicated on the assumption that everything that Israel does is illegal and violates international law. And that Israel's very existence is a violation of Palestinian rights, and everything Israel does to defend itself, in the eyes of these people, is terror. The complaint reads, Treasury claims that it takes a very vigorous and active role in terms of monitoring the activities. It continues, U.S. tax-exempt entities and their donors, settlement leaders, and the construction companies they hire to build housing developments and shopping malls can all be criminally prosecuted because they have conspired to fund, facilitate, trespass on, demolish, and/or confiscate private Palestinian property, all in the name of settlement expansion. According to an attorney for the group, quote, huge tax deductions are being taken that support ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Guess who picks up the tab? The American taxpayer. There's something wrong with that, unquote. The people behind the suit want these friends of groups to be called, quote, special designated global terrorists, unquote, stripping them of their tax-exempt status and freezing their assets. The case also states that there are huge penalties that go with that. The people bringing the suit also assert that the United States and the Treasury are being two-faced. They are not following their own laws regarding Israel and have turned a blind eye for decades. What is the suit really trying to say? It's trying to say that since the United States has already termed certain Palestinian groups as terrorist organizations, the United States Treasury should now do the same for Israeli groups. Why? Because they have written in their suit, the entities cannot promote or finance racially or religiously discriminatory practices, nor can they violate federal statutes in the process of raising funds and or transmitting the funds overseas, unquote. It is a foolish lawsuit, but just because it's foolish and without merit does not mean it will go away easily. This case clearly demonstrates that the Palestinians and their supporters, like those in the BDS movement, are becoming even more creative in their attacks against Israel. They are trying a new way to hurt Israel in the pocketbook. It is important to also talk about the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It will not end in a direct war between these two Middle Eastern countries. What will happen is that the region will continue to be divided along the classic Sunni-Shiite split, as it has been. And this time, maybe, and at last, the West will finally understand and internalize the message that the Muslim world is, has, and always will be at one another's proverbial throats, killing each other over issues that date back centuries. This is all about the conflict between Sunnis and Shiites. The conflict is centuries old. It is a continuation of a rift that was created after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, at which time a challenge arose as to who would succeed the Prophet. Would it be a Shiite or would it be a Sunni? Muhammad had no sons. He had a daughter named Fatima. The Shiites wanted the son-in-law of Muhammad, while the Sunnis wanted the best student to succeed him. Parenthetically, and hopefully, people will understand that the Palestinian conflict with Israel is not at the core of any real issues at stake in the Middle East. On Saturday, January 9th, 2016, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, met and condemned Iran. On Sunday, January 10th, one day later, the Arab League met in Cairo and did the same thing. Everyone following events in the Middle East knows that the Iranians ransacked, burned, and gutted the Saudi embassy in Tehran after the execution of a Shiite cleric in Saudi Arabia. When the GCC convened, they released an announcement that they were going to advance additional measures against Iran. The GCC was founded in 1981. It's composed of 6 Persian Gulf nations: Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Kuwait. Member nations cooperate on many levels, especially economically and culturally. But what is most essential and what gives them the most strength and import is that these 6 nations have pledged to act as a unified front when necessary. The Arab League meeting began with Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Foreign Minister of the United Arab Emirates, declaring that it was an emergency meeting. The meeting, he said, comes in light of a dangerous escalation. He continued, "We strongly condemn the attacks on diplomatic missions by Iran and absolutely reject the Iranian policy of interference in the affairs of the kingdom and any other Arab state." In further describing the situation, the United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister said, "Iran does not hesitate to exploit sectarianism as a way to gain control of the region." Interestingly, the final document to be signed at the Arab League meeting, a document that was signed by everyone attending the meeting except Lebanon, talked about the discovery of a large cell in Bahrain that was sponsored and trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Investigations into the cell followed the money trail and led them back to Iran via Hezbollah. The clear objective was to unseat Sunni leadership in Bahrain by destabilizing the country and creating a coup. Islam is filled with internal conflict. For those in the West who do not yet realize it, tensions between Sunnis and Shiites are even greater than tensions between Islam and non-believers. The non-believer can be saved. The heretic cannot be saved. Islam, Shiite and Sunni alike, views the other as heretics, and according to their belief, they are both permitted to murder the other with impunity. Modern times call for modern techniques. even in the age-old conflict. At this stage, both Iran and Saudi Arabia will continue to use proxies and the international media to stab and jab each other. Yet, it is not yet clear that interests in this case, in this squabble, will turn into a full-scale conflict. The cost is far too great, I think. Neither country can afford it. Neither can predict how great the losses would be, even if the other side won. The real test now is how well each country does at drawing in other countries and tribes, and even non-Muslim leaders, to support their cause. In the meantime, they will name and call, blame each other for violating the true dictates of Islam. They will call their proxies to attack the other in the name of the true interpretation of Islam. Right now, it looks like the Saudis have the upper hand. They have the numbers. 85% of the Muslim world is Sunni. But Russia is on the side of Iran. We see that clearly in Syria. And who knows which side the United States will choose? Some are arguing for the United States to remain impartial. Why get involved, they say. The problem is that the United States is partly at fault for this modern-day round of rivalry. It was the United States, after all. They created the now infamous nuke deal, which sided with Iran and raised Iran to the level equal to Saudi Arabia, which had until now been given favored status as a friend by the United States. The Saudi Sunnis saw this as an epic betrayal, and it was. Coming up next, Points of View. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is from USA Today. It's a column by David Andelman and was published on January 5th, 2016. USA Today has a very long set of titles and subtitles in general. The title of this column is America Between a Shiite and a Sunni Place, subtitle, If the U.S. appears to side with either Saudi Arabia or Iran, it risks fanning Middle East flames. David Andelman is a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors. He's the editor emeritus of World Policy Journal and author of A Shattered Peace, Versailles 1919, and The Price We Pay Today. Remember also that USA Today always adds a comment to their columns. This is it. In addition to its own editorials, USA Today publishes diverse opinions from outside writers, including our board of contributors. To read more columns like this, go on to the opinion front page. Here's how Andelman begins. He sets the stage attempting to show just how great, how huge the rift is between Shiites and Sunnis. He says, quote, perhaps the greatest present danger to America's security is the perception, if not the reality, of the United States choosing sides amidst renewed violence in the battle between Sunnis and Shiites in the heart of the Middle East. For more than 1,400 years, Sunnis and Shiites have been at odds. The first armed clash between adherents of the two main branches of Islam took place in AD 680 in Karbala, still a major city in central Iraq. Andelman now tries to lay out who we, the United States, should support in the conflict between the Shiites and the Sunnis. He says, certainly we have every reason for continuing to play the Saudi card. Saudi monarchs were, for decades, the most consistently friendly Arab leaders toward America. Iran, by contrast, since the ouster of the Shah, has been one of America's most determined foes. Saudi rulers have supported a host of U.S. adventures in the Islamic world, in neighboring Iraq, and in the battle against al-Qaeda, which was founded by the son of one of the monarchy's most devoted servants. Other Sunni nations are equally important to the United States' interests. Bahrain, a Sunni monarchy ruling an increasingly unruly Shiite majority, serves as home to the American Fifth Fleet. But then Andelman pulls back. He says, we should remain neutral. Yes, neutral. Listen to how he puts it. At stake is an ability to bring together the kind of Arab coalition President Obama seeks. Forces that could challenge Sunni ISIL on the ground. Other countries, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, pillars of the Middle East, economic establishment, are lining up behind Saudi Arabia. Certain figures in Iraq and the Assad regime in Syria are lining up with Shiite Iran. But in paramount jeopardy is America's image as a neutral force of moderation. Only by restoring that image can the United States hope for a constructive outcome in Syria or in the struggle with the paramount threat, the Islamic State. This is a very problematic conclusion. After all, the U.S. was part of empowering Iran by signing the nuclear deal. How can Andelman think that we are not involved? Or maybe he thinks that because we made a mistake earlier, we should pull back. Second up is a piece by David Ignatius. It was published in the Washington Post. It deals with the same issue but comes to the exact opposite conclusion. Ignatius is a columnist for the Washington Post. He's a prize-winning columnist, has been covering the Middle East and the CIA for more than 25 years. He's also a novelist. His novels include Agents of Innocence, Body of Lies, and The Increment. He lives in Washington, D.C. This column is called The Costly Blunders of Saudi Arabia's Anxiety-Ridden Monarchy. It was published again on January 5th, 2016. Ignatius begins, "Fragile" is the word that journalist Karen Elliott House used to describe Saudi Arabia in her 2012 book about the country. Observing Saudi Arabia is like watching a gymnast dismount the balance beam in slow motion. She wrote, "The world holds its breath, wondering if the Saudis will nail the landing or crash to the mat." This past week, the House of Saud seemed to have lost its footing. The kingdom's fear of a rising Iran led it to execute a dissident Shiite cleric, triggering riots in Iran, a break in diplomatic relations, and a sharp escalation in the sectarian feud that is ravaging the Middle East. Ignatius argues that the Saudis have lost their center of balance, that is me extending the use of his metaphor, and asks whether they are acting out of fear and not out of strength or good judgment. Then Ignatius explains, Saudi Arabia is a frightened monarchy. It's beset by Sunni extremists from Islamic State and Shiite extremists backed by Iran. It is bogged down in a costly, unsuccessful war in Yemen, and it mistrusts its superpower patron and protector, the United States, in part because the United States' role in brokering the nuclear deal that ended Iran's isolation. Countries that feel vulnerable sometimes do impulsive and counterproductive things, and that has been the case recently with Saudi Arabia. Ignatius concludes with a resounding statement. He fully disagrees with Andelman and says, the Saudis need reassurance that Washington has their back. Even more, they need to build a society that's self-confident enough to combat extremism at home and abroad. Ignatius is correct, and Andelman is wrong. Siding with Iran was a mistake, and the Saudis are reacting. Part of their reaction is the tension that we see, just as part of the arrogance of Iran is due to the nuclear agreement that they signed. In their eyes, they became a regime which is 100% equal with the United States. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. We're going to talk about 4 cartoons today. The first is by Dana Summers of the Chicago Tribune and the Tribune Content Agency. The cartoon is divided into 2 panels. Panel 1 has an Israeli fighting a Palestinian. Each represents the larger group, of course. In the air behind them is a plane, and the plane reads Netanyahu. The plane is flying upward in the air and will be landing and start landing in the second panel in the United States. The symbolism here is that Netanyahu flies the U.S., and in the second panel, Democrats are fighting Republicans. And in the background is the Capitol building. Summers' point is that fighting is all around Netanyahu, and it's Netanyahu's fault. Next up is a cartoon by former Brooklynite and now Jerusalemite Yaakov Kirshen, known as Dry Bones. This cartoon is dated January 5th, 2016. It has only one panel. 2 Muslims are in the frame. Above them reads, Islamicism, on the way to world domination, split into 2 warring factions. The 2 Muslims in the picture look like they're fighting a war of words and ideas. Under one of them reads the caption, Iranian Shias. Under the second reads the caption, the Saudi Sunnis. The third cartoon is from Amsterdam. It's by Tom Jensen. He draws for the Amsterdam Daily Trouw. And it was published October 2015. There are many people on the mat with their hands red with blood, all twisted up and intermingled, playing that fun game called Twister, where they crawl over and all over one another on the floor. The cartoon is actually profound. The cartoon is actually called the Syrian game of Twister. The fourth cartoon and final cartoon is a pictoon. It combines a picture with a caption. This pictoon I got from Powerline blog in their Week in Review. It was dated January 9th, 2016. It's a picture of a group of Amish people walking along the road in their proper, modest dress. Above the picture reads, here it is, 100% undeniable proof. And then under the picture, the caption reads, you can be completely devoted to your religion, wear beards, dress modestly, reject modern society without strapping explosive vests to children. This pictoon really says it all. There are many societies that struggle and even reject modern world, but they don't become suicide bombers. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Remember, the United States proclaimed that their Western-backed forces in Iraq had finally ousted ISIS from Ramadi. The action took days to accomplish, and we were treated to an almost minute-by-minute accounting of Western forces as they went from building to building and took back the city. And then the announcement came, ISIS was removed from the city, and it's now under control of the Western-backed Iraqi forces. So how is it possible then that the Arabic media sites are filled with the story that ISIS blew up a public hospital in Ramadi? Clearly, ISIS is still there, and clearly they targeted the hospital in order to terrorize the residents of Ramadi. The selection of a target, especially a hospital, is deliberate. We in the West would ask, how could anyone target a hospital? ISIS doesn't ask that question. Actually, ISIS does not hold by the same values and act according to the same principles that the West does. Hospitals are the perfect target for ISIS. It demonstrates their ruthlessness, and it emphasizes that those people at the target site are traitors and not fellow followers of the ISIS version of Islam. Ramadi is a city of 450,000 people. It's located about 60 miles west of Baghdad. Ramadi lies on the essential trade route used by truckers making their way between Baghdad and Amman, Jordan. ISIS is telling all of those in the region that they are still active and potent in Ramadi. They are broadcasting that the early reports issued by the West are nothing more than anti-ISIS propaganda. Since October, the United States has been bombing ISIS oil fields. This is a significant change in policy. Until then, oil was not touched. The thinking was that oil would be an important and immediate cash source for any new government that would be replacing ISIS. But as of October, the United States changed its plans and its tactics, now thinking that the cash profits ISIS was getting from the oil was helping fund and run their militant terrorist state. So the United States finally understood ISIS was not teetering or toppling. The shocker is that this huge change in policy, a change that is intended to strangle ISIS monetarily, has to date only involved 65 strikes. The strikes have reduced ISIS oil production by only 30%, from 45,000 barrels per day to 34,000 barrels per day. In real figures, this would be a drop from $1,575,000 per day to $1,190,000 in market prices, that is. The only redeeming part of all this is that ISIS is selling their oil at significantly below market value, selling at between $20 to $25 per barrel. It still means that they're making $850,000 a day on oil. This is just another example of how the United States is only half-heartedly confronting ISIS. If they want to strangle ISIS and remove their oil profits, it will require more than 65 strikes and more than a 30% reduction in oil production. The United States is reluctant to do more That reluctance permits ISIS to run their state and fund their fighters. The United States must decide that they really want to do this vis-a-vis ISIS, and then go after it. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, tell me what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Quran is filled with stories about Jews and Jewish tribes? Some are positive and some are very, very negative. One of the most important examples deals with the Jewish tribe of Quraysh at Hudaybiyah. They were a strong Jewish tribe, the only remaining Jews in the region around Medina, which was also known as Yathrib before Muhammad changed its name. In about the year 622, Muhammad needed their help and entered into a 10-year treaty with the Jews there. This treaty and the breaking of the treaty has become a model in Islam and is constantly invoked by leaders even today. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.